Hi, friends. Welcome to Find Me in a Book podcast. I'm your host, Tav. Welcome. I'm so excited to get into this episode 1. First off, this is my first ever podcast I've ever done, episode, whatever. So if it's kind of a mess, it's understandable. But just know that I'm really excited that you're here. I'm excited to talk about books with you. Romance books, that's my jam. Any other books, sure, I'll read them. But romance books, I am 100% in there. So, I want this podcast to be as if like we're talking to each other as besties, and I will tell you at a certain point when we're going to start talking about like the book, and it'll be complete spoilers. So I recommend, if you haven't read the book Canary by Tijan, which is what we'll be going over today, if you haven't read that yet and are planning on it, I would stop in a couple minutes once I've described the book. I'd stop and then read it and then come back. But if you're like, you know what, I just wanted to learn more about it, I want to know all the details, and then I'll go back and read it. I completely understand. I'm the type of person that if I'm halfway through a movie and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to end, I go to the synopsis and I'm like, I want to know, I'm going to learn how this ends so that I don't have the anxiety of like the unknown. So if you're like me, that's okay. We're going to get along just fine. So today, on this first episode, we're going to be talking about the book that Tijan just released probably about a month ago. It's called Canary, and I don't even know if I'm saying her name right, Tijan. That's how I'm going to say it. So if she's called anything else, just let me know how to pronounce it. So we're going to go by Tijan today. So Canary is amazing. I loved it. Honestly, I read it once through, and then a couple days later, I was like, I need to read this again because I loved it so much. Canary is like a mafia cartel, enemies to lover book. So, with it being like a mafia cartel book, they usually are pretty violent. There's a lot of shooting, killing, sometimes kidnapping. There is swearing. I assume that in like the real cartel mafia, they do swear a lot. So in this book, there is a lot of swearing. So if you're not about that life, you can skim over it. It's not excessive enough where you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of swearing in this. It's enough though that you kind of like get the point of like the situations that they're in, kind of like they emphasize it. So, that being said, Mafia Cartel, we love that. We love enemies to lovers. Tijan has also done like other Mafia books. A couple that I've read are like Cole, Carter Reed. I want to start reading like the Bennett Mafia. This kind of world just interests me because I am so far away from it and know nothing about mafia or cartels, and I don't even know if these are correct. But I'm gonna say in my head that these are correct. So kind of crazy. There are other books that Tijan also reads, which one of them is called Anti-Stepbrother, and it's my favorite book almost of all time. I have a lot of favorite books, you'll learn, but this one is a really good one. It's like based in like college days, and it's just, I don't know, it's technically, you could call it a slow burn, which this one kind of is. Canary is a slow burn as well, but it's not slow enough where you're like, okay, when are they gonna get together? Like, I'm gonna skip pages. It's not to that point. It's a good slow burn, like anticipation. So, like, let's start talking about the book. I'm so excited. So yes, at this point, I'm telling everyone this is the checkpoint, you could call it, just so that you are also aware. I'm going to have like 3 different scales, you could say. So, mother standard, which my mother loves, very tame romances and very like pure fairy tale type things like that. And then we have my sister standard, which she likes more spicy. Like she's in the middle, I guess you could say. There goes my mother, my sister, which likes spicy, but not too much spicy. And then there's me that I'm like, bring it on. I love it all. Like, I'm not going to yuck someone else's yum. Kinks might not be my thing, but I'll read about it. And if it's a good story, I'm there for it. So that's kind of the standard we're going off of. This one for sure is just a tab standard. a TAV rating. I don't know the words that I want to call it yet, but my sister probably could skim through it and she would like it, but to probably not her cup of tea. This is definitely my cup of tea, though. I love this so much. So, saying that, you know the standard. This is the checkpoint. Past this point, we're going to just deep dive into this book. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to rave about it, and we'll fangirl about this book boyfriend because he is dreamy. So let's get to it. Okay, so first off, this book, first page, drops the MF word. So you're like, ooh, okay, we're getting into it. You meet, the first chapter is called Girl, and a couple other chapters are called Girl. So you don't know her name, which is kind of mysterious. You're like, okay, girl, like, who are you? And it basically opens up as there is her, and then there is her mob boss, or we'll call him like her mafia boss. His name is Rays. I think that's how you say it, Rays. That's how I'm going to say it. And then there's a henchman 1 and a henchman 2. And then basically they're in this hotel room and they have this guy on his knees trying to get this information from him. There's guns. And one of the henchmen 1, henchman 1, he starts to get a little mouthy with the mob boss, Rays. And in her mind, this girl's mind, she's like, oh no, like, he's starting to get mouthy. This isn't going to end well. And she sees that henchman 2 is thinking the same thing. So they kind of like step back because they know like something's about to go down. So then Reyes is like, what are you saying? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And then that's when Reyes looks at the girl and is like, hey, will he be a problem for me? And you read like her thought process and start to say, like, you start to think to yourself as well, like, why is she here? Like, what is her point being here? And then you learn, like, her gut instinct is always correct. And Reyes knows that. That's why, like, you learn later, he won her in a poker game because he had heard about her. So he looks at her and he's like, hey, is he going to be a problem for me about, like, henchman 1? And she is like, yes. And so immediately he kills henchman 1. And then the guy on the ground, like the informant guy or the snitch guy, is like, oh, he like says his whatever. And then they kill him as well. Yes. First couple pages, 2 people die. Yes, this is where we're starting. From there, they go to like their little house. I want to say you start to learn like more about her and her background. Basically, she is in the mafia. She got in because she's trying to find her sister. Learning about that relationship, her sister started dating this guy named Leo. And Leo was a bad guy. We learned that he's like part of the mafia. He is a pimp. She gets into that, and then basically this girl's sister gets taken in there. Her name's Brooke. And so this girl is like, I gotta find her. I need to go and find this Leo guy, find his bosses. I need to kill them. I need to save her. And she learns that there's these 3 mafia brothers. And she thinks that one of the mafia brothers is the boss of Leo. So she like gets in there and she starts like going to all these different mob bosses, everything like that. And that's where Reyes wins her from the poker game. We know that they are starting to do all these other assignments. We start to learn about all the other like mob bosses. And I don't know if anyone else does this. But the first couple chapters, I'm always like intrigued on who is going to be the romance. Like, who is it going to be with? And she kind of explains Reyes as she doesn't know that if he's attractive. I think she's just been too desensitized with everything that she just doesn't know. And so I'm like, okay, well, it's definitely not henchman 1 because he just died. So is it Reyes? Is it henchman 2? Are we going to learn more about him? And then they get another henchman. So we have Reyes, and then henchman 1's name, the one that was number 2, he's number 1 now. His name is Jake. And then we learn that the new one is Cavers. Cavers. We're going to say Cavers. And then a couple chapters in, we learn that she wants to go by the name Ash. So there's the four of them. They don't trust Cavers because they're like, we're pretty sure he's working from a different mob boss just trying to be a snitch. You learn that Reyes is so experienced in these things. Like, he knows the right steps to take. He's right there if you need him. He has just been in this world for so long that it's like, oh my gosh, how did he even think of that? Like, he's just crazy. But you start to she starts to explain to him more that you're like, okay, I think she's kind of interested in him. And if you've ever seen the movie Bad Moms, the love interest in there, his name, I believe, is Jay Hernandez. That's who I imagine Ray's looking like. So he's got a hottie body. You know what I'm talking about? Book boyfriend material. Even though I wouldn't want to have a boyfriend that's in the mafia. That seems really scary. Anyways, that's who I imagine him as, but like taller, buffer, because I think they said that Ray's is like 6'2", 6'3", like tall, like big man. And I'm like, oh, yes, ma'am. So that's who I imagine he looks like. I don't really imagine the girls very often. They're just kind of like generic to me. So, but I guess she has like blonde hair. So I just imagine blonde hair. I just imagine the men. But we're gonna move on. So then you start to realize, so they have to go to Texas because Reyes' boss is one of the three brothers. And they're like, hey, you need to go down to Texas because we want to have a relationship with the cartel. And Reyes is like, we learned that Reyes used to be in that cartel and his mom was in there, his stepsister, we learn about stepsister, and one of the cartel people that he needs to make this partnership the partnership is going to be with like his stepbrother. We learn kind of all about that. It goes south, but they're in Texas. They move around a lot just because this cartel keeps sending them messages like, hey, like, we don't want this partnership. And then he like goes and kills, like, Reyes goes and kills like all these people and stuff. At that point, I believe it's like chapter 17, where Ash is like, hey, I have this list, and one of them is like, I don't want to shoot a gun. But then she decides like, hey, I probably need to learn how to shoot a gun. So then Reyes is like, oh, I'll teach you. And at this point, sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. When they were flying to Texas, there's this group of old women, it sounds like, they like start to look at him and kind of like leer at him, just very like inappropriate looking at him. And that's when Ash realized like, oh, he's very attractive. And so it kind of goes weird, and he like puts his hand on her back, like lower back. And I don't know why that is just the most attractive like action, like gesture. Like, he puts his hand on the lower back, and I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Like, this is amazing. And then he says like, oh, we're married, to like the older woman that did come up with him, which she turns out to be a weirdo. But it was like, oh, we're married. And then she's like, what? My husband? And then that's when she starts to think like, okay, like, I think he's really attractive. Anyways, fast forward to chapter 17, which I do know about, is that they're going to shoot guns, and they kind of go through this conversation about, I need to come up with a fun word for sex, because I don't super want to say sex. I'm still like a very sheltered girl where I'm like, oh, sex, like, oh, that's a bad word. So one day we're going to have a word for it, and then we're all going to know. Anyways, for this episode, we're going to say sex, because I can do this. I'm an adult. They have this conversation about it, and then on the way home, or to wherever they're staying, she starts to get like fidgety, like, oh my gosh, the guns like unleash something in me, like, I am just so fidgety. And then he's like, take your pants off. And I'm like, what's happening? And then he like pulls off on the side of the road, the back roads, and then they do it for the first time. And it's not descriptive, but it is like, definitely, I've read books where it's very descriptive, and I'm like, should I close my eyes for this? But this one is not. It's descriptive, you know what's happening, but it's not too much that you're like, ooh, okay. So it's very nice, very nicely put. You know what's happening, you feel the emotions in your body, at least I did, and then they're like, okay, all done, and go from there. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that just happened. And then they start to go about like their killing of people, and they're still suspicious of cavers. And then they learn that Jake is also a hidden guy or like snitch for another mob boss that's still under like the same brother, you could say, because there's like, I get kind of confused with all these names, but I'm pretty sure there's like multiple bosses under one of the brothers. So yeah, I couldn't really keep track of them. But so they're both basically snitches, and like at one point they are all in the office and Ray's is like, I know all about this. He calls them out, and then she's like, she has become pretty close with like the two henchmen, and she's like, no, like we can't kill them, like we got to figure out something else, we can't kill them. And he is like really mad at her, and then he tells them get out of the room, and then they have sex, and it's pretty amazing. And then later on he like leaves, and then he comes back, and basically the two henchmen have like sworn to him, and they're now on his side. So now they're like the four amigos, and it's really great. But yeah, in the meantime of all of that, they keep having to like move houses because this cartel is finding them, but also Reyes is going and killing these people that are on the list that he got from one of the brothers. And basically, there's just a lot of killing, a lot of sneakiness, a lot of just craziness. And while that's happening, they're like starting to like love each other, and he's very protective of her, which is really nice. The henchmen start to like, they all just become like a little family, which is really cool. Oh yes, and then the cartel comes up again because he's like has to kill these certain people, and then we learn about like the cartel's boss was married to Reyes' mom. The mob boss's son like kills the dad so that he can be it. Anyways, and stepbrother, stepsister, stuff like that. You'll know, which is really interesting because we do get to learn about his stepsister some more. They have like a really good relationship, and he like wants to protect her. And this was very interesting to me because I wasn't surprised, but this guy has so many connections, and they go like all over the states. But they go to a certain place and they meet these people that are like, yes, we'll protect her. Basically, you'll never see her again. She'll have a new identity, just can be completely erased. The sister's not happy, but she understands eventually because like people are coming after him. Their mom dies somehow, I can't remember how, but they're like upset about it. Obviously, that just like blew my mind that there somewhere out there are people that can do that, just completely erase a person and start new. That just blows my mind that that is out there, because once again, I am a very sheltered person, and I've been trying to like figure out about this world. And so things like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like there really are cartels and mafias, and I just have no idea about it. We're kind of at that point where she like disappears. Reyes and her name's Ash, they fall in love, and there's like more sex scenes, which are great. It gets a little bit more descriptive as it goes into the movie. And at one point after they do it, she says, I love you, because she said that it's important that he knew, especially tonight, because they were about to like go and kill more people off this list that she created that had like wronged her and wronged her sister. And then he says, I love you back. And I don't know why, like my heart was like, okay, like that is so sweet. When you think about it, like, oh, they just had sex and then they're in the mafia, and he's like, oh, I love you back, and it's like, oh, he has emotions. So we love that. Yeah, they're going to like kill. Oh, they have to from the the brother. We like meet him. His name's Roman, and he's like, you need to kill my brothers and like their boss or the bosses underneath them, and you need to do it within a couple days' time. So it gets kind of intense, but of course he does it because he's like a badass. And then like they just have a little family, and it's just amazing. And towards the end of the book, they're cool with Roman. Like Ash has met with Roman, who's one of the brothers, And I thought it was very interesting because you kind of know about Ash and her sister. But, like, yeah, one of the last episodes, it says that she is, like, in Roman's basement. And they basically have these two detectives come in that Roman knows, like, his sources or whatever. She wants to tell her story. She wants to tell the story of Brooke. She wants to tell her story and basically go over what happened to her so that, like, the police know about her, and the police know about her sister, because I guess that there was, like, a missing poster that looked like her, and she doesn't want, like, Ray's in the room because she's like, I don't want you by me when I tell them. And he's like, no, like, I'm going to be in the same room, like, this is going to happen. And I don't know why she doesn't want him to know, because they're basically, like, together and they love each other. So then she starts talking about her mom and that she was, like, sick. She said that she wanted Ash to have a friend, and you're like, what? Like, they aren't actually sisters? And then she says, like, my name isn't Ash. I don't know what my real name is. And you kind of, like, learn that throughout the book, because she says, like, all these different names at one point, and you're like, well, what's your real name? And she just says, call me Ash. But she doesn't really know what her real name is. Her mom wanted her to have a sister, and then one day she had a sister. She knows that she wasn't adopted. Her mom told her that she was, but she definitely wasn't, because she saw, like, a missing poster. And basically you realize that her mom kidnapped this girl. So they grew up together, and she says, like, you can check your database. Her new name was Brooke. So the sister, Brooke, was kidnapped, and they named her Brooke. But her before name, that makes sense, before she was kidnapped, her name was Ashley. So that's where Ash got the name Ashley. And then you learn, like, her dad was basically a drunk and went into rehab a couple times and just didn't, we don't really know very much about him. And then she says, like, once our mom died, like, Brooke went off the rails. She was pulled into, like, that whole industry, like, a prostitution by a pimp. And eventually I guess they charged the father with, like, child endangerment, with neglect of a child. They did find Brooke. It was picked up through, like, a tip. Roman, who is one of the brothers, he helped get the charges dropped and helped her, like, helped Brooke get into a new life, and basically said, like, hey, they picked her up. Do you want to talk to her? And she's like, maybe one day, not today, which is so kind of strange that it's like, you went through this whole thing with the mafia cartel, and you got your sister safe, everything like that, and then you're like, maybe one day I'll talk to her. Which, I don't know, she was probably going through a lot. I just don't understand that, I guess, because I'm like, if I couldn't find my sister, even if she wasn't really my sister, I'd want to see her, because I'd be like, I went through all this stuff for you. Ray says, like, hey, like, I'm in this for my whole life, like, do you want to start a new life? You can go out, start a new life, or do you want to stay with me? And she's like, I'm gonna stay with you. And I'm like, good choice, sister. And then, super cute surprise is that she becomes pregnant, and Rise, I don't know what I keep calling him. He is so happy, and I love that he's so happy about it. I thought it was really cool as kind of like an ending. Ash is like, hey, like, I want to stay here with you, but I want to make a difference. Like, I want to get more girls out of the system. I want to help people. I want to do some good. She's like, I can't do anything to stop what my mom did, but maybe others, like what Brooke's boyfriend did to her. And then Ray's is like, you can try to do some good, but you can't, like, rely on that being your sole purpose, to work for Roman. He's like, if you want out, like, we can disappear, like, within 12 hours. Like, he's like, I've done the preparations already, which is insane. Like, he's so prepared for everything. And he's like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And then he, like, puts his hand, like, on her stomach, and it's so cute. And she says, I'll only stay if I make a difference. If I can't, and there's absolutely no indication that Roman will listen to me, then I want out. I want out with you. And Ray's is like, deal. And they made a deal. Then it was like, getting ready to work, and she was known as the Canary because she has that gut intuition, which we kind of talked about, not really, but that's why they had like used her and stuff. And you realize in the book that Ray's doesn't utilize her very much because she doesn't like it. So he like respects that. The very ending, she says, "I was ready to get to work," which is super cool that she changed it around to be in the mafia, to help people get out of the situations like those girls that have the pimps and don't want to be there, and trafficking and stuff like that. So I thought it was a very good ending, and they end up together and she's pregnant and it's so cute. That was Canary. I feel like a storyteller right now. That was Canary by Tijan. I definitely recommend it. I am the type of person, I have the Kindle Unlimited on my iPad. That's something that we can talk about really quick, because a lot of people, they either don't know about Kindle or they go through, I think there's like a Books and Barnes and Noble one, or buying the books. I personally, like, I haven't bought really any books. I want to make a list of the ones that I super love, and then I'll buy like the physical books for them. But in the meantime, I have a Kindle app on my iPad, and I pay monthly $10 for Kindle Unlimited. Basically, you can have 10 titles out at a time, and you are like renting them. So once you're done with one, you like return it. I have that in air quotes, return it, and you can rent another book. So I definitely recommend that. That saved me so much money. Sorry, that was really bad on the ears. So much money. And I'm pretty sure that this one was on Kindle Unlimited. A lot of the times newer books are on there, which is really great. And then there's such a huge variety. That's where I've read most of my books. So that's an avenue that you can read these types of books. And if you're just a hardcore like physical book reader, I applaud you. That is amazing. Let's keep doing this. I enjoy this. Please keep listening. Please follow me on Instagram. Find me in a book podcast. But I love you guys. I'm very grateful for you, and let's just keep reading.